Planets in the 7th house. If you have the sun in the 7th house, this is a sign of a possible relationship with a person outwardly bright, proud, and possibly self-centered. If the sun is strong, then the person can be influential, generous, and noble. In general, the sun gives a proud, ambitious partner. When the sun is afflicted, the partner is selfish, arrogant, and conceited. The sun in the 7th house is not favorable for the owner of the card, since an authoritative partner can exert strong pressure and a person may not understand where his interests are and where they are not. Even if there is a defeat of harmony in such a marriage, there can be no one, in any case, be in a subordinate position. An aspect from a benefic Jupiter can soften things up and make relationships stable and productive. The moon in the 7th house. The moon in the 7th house indicates a great emotional dependence on a partner, which often leads to early marriage, especially in the horoscopes of men with a growing moon. A person will look for his emotional reflection, listener and viewer in a partner in order to realize a part of his own nature hidden from other people. In a woman's chart, this position of the moon also indicates that she puts a lot of effort into relationships, into finding a partner, even if she herself does not realize it. In this position, marriage is usually based on romantic feelings. In the chart of a man, this same position of the moon can talk about the search for a girlfriend who would be a reflection of the role that his mother played in his life. In the horoscopes of men, this position of the moon attracts capricious, sensitive women who are prone to frequent and unexpected mood swings. And the more difficult the position of the moon in terms of sign and aspects, the more such a partnership will be a source of difficulties. When the moon is afflicted, these qualities will manifest themselves in the resentment of the wife, in regular, tearful dialogues in the name of peace in the family. In severe cases, an afflicted moon in the 7th house attracts real emotional vampires. If the moon is well located and has good aspects in the male horoscope, the woman will be characterized by emotionality, housekeeping, strong maternal instincts, and not only in relation to children but also to her husband. For a person of any gender with the moon in the 7th house, either he or his partner will place great importance on emotional resonance, trust, and will be very demanding in this area. This attitude does not contribute to stability in relationships, but gives changes in marriage and relationships, since the moon is the main significator of changes. It should be noted that this position of the moon also indicates possible connections with the married, especially with the waning moon. Mercury in the 7th house inclines more towards relationships built on the mind than on the heart's attraction. A person with such Mercury is characterized by an interest in smart, reasonable, educated partners with whom there is something to talk about. But the changeable nature of this planet does not exclude many connections. If this is a woman, then a coquette. If a man, then he loves to flirt. With this position of Mercury, fictitious paper marriages are also possible. Marriage life can either start early or marry a younger person. Mercury is one of the planets that, when positioned in the 7th house, says that in a relationship, a person will look for people noticeably younger than himself, especially with Mercury rising in front of the sun. In general, this position gives a lot of versatile contacts in life. People, new acquaintances, and communication play a huge role in a person's life, and it does not always benefit existing relationships. An afflicted Mercury in the 7th house represents a partner who is prone to arguments, incessant chatter, a person who is unreliable and probably two-faced, deceitful. A planet that has an influence on Mercury and its sign will characterize such a partner in more detail, since it is precisely its qualities that he adopts. Mercury is weak and affected, especially burned, a sign of attraction for people who are superficial, stupid, or even with psychological problems, similarly with the defeat of Mercury. In addition, the affliction of Mercury in the 7th house can mean a close relationship with a distant relative or a relative. Mercury itself is a sexless planet, and therefore it can have a unisex effect on a partner, without an emphasis on gender, due to age, beliefs, or sexual orientation. When analyzing the horoscopes of a person with a suspicion of an alternative orientation, this factor, as an indirect and additional one, should definitely be taken into account. Venus in the 7th house. Venus in the 7th house is a direct indication of a relationship that will be built on love or because of love. However, it is important to understand that Venus in the 7th house does not guarantee the success of the union, but only indicates a marriage based on tender feelings. And this is true even in cases where the partner does not deserve them at all. But what this love will give depends on the strength of Venus. In a male horoscope, if Venus is favorable, the marriage usually turns out to be a happy one, and relationships often begin in youth. In a male chart, such Venus represents a refined, artistic, gentle, neat wife, usually with a pleasant appearance and good taste. With Venus ascending to the Sun, an independent wife. In case of defeat, the wife will show slovenliness, licentiousness, bad taste, infidelity, especially for air signs. In the horoscope of a woman, harmonious Venus represents a compromised husband in character, engaged in a Venusian type of activity. He can be an artist, financier, designer, and so on. But when defeated, Venus represents a lazy man who tends to live in a big way and is often very obsessed with his appearance or with other women. Mars in the 7th house is a traditional sign of conflict in marriage. A person is easily drawn into disputes and showdowns. Such a situation is conducive to early and hasty marriage with aspiring to dominance. With a further development of the personality, this same aspect leads to quarrels, conflicts, and increases the danger of divorce. The more likely it is, the more Mars is afflicted. Relations in marriage are usually restless, even with a harmonious Mars. A person with this position has an enterprising, imperious, stubborn, and independent character in partnership. He can be belligerent in relationships with a life partner but passionate in love. Mars, having a minor defeat, indicates passionate romances in which, even during periods of stable relationships, there is an element of antagonism and mutual struggle, as well as heightened sensitivity in the partner to criticism and any behavior that can be interpreted as disrespectful. Mars in the 7th house as a significator of a partner in a female chart can mean a husband engaged in Martian activities, most often working in law enforcement agencies, perhaps an entrepreneur or athlete. With the defeat of Mars in this house, the partner becomes simply quick-tempered and destructive, up to spitefulness. Internal aggressiveness and uncompromising attitudes attract adequate criticism and opposition. Serious losses are possible in lawsuits or direct confrontation with competitors. There is a danger that the husband, wife will turn out to be enemies or adversaries in a lawsuit. For women, this position is more difficult than for men. Mars in the 7th house indicates possible quarrels between spouses, which can lead to a break in relations. Mars is especially difficult in cardinal signs. The nature of the defeat of Mars indicates problems in relations with people of the Martian type. Defeat by Saturn is cruelty and vindictiveness. Defeat by the Sun or irascibility and irritability in Rahu in Venusian signs is lust and infidelity. An afflicted watery Mars in the 7th house can be a direct indication that the partner is prone to alcohol abuse. Jupiter in the 7th house. A classic indicator of a happy or rather profitable marriage with opportunities for professional cooperation. It also means marriage with a successful, socially fulfilled, and accomplished person. It should be noted that this is only when Jupiter is not heavily afflicted and well placed in the sign. In modern times, such a position may indicate marriage to a foreigner or to a person from a higher social stratum. Position may indicate deliberate marriage for the sake of money or a higher position in society. In a woman's natal chart, this position indicates marriage to a lawyer, doctor or priest, merchant, sportsman, or a person engaged in any of many other Jovian activities. For example, such as management, if we talk about modern realities. However, happiness in these relationships may not be. Jupiter gives prosperity and prestige, mutual respect and trust, but still not love as in the case of Venus. With such a Jupiter, the desire to legitimize relationships is characteristic. A person can even be an opponent against civil marriages and free relationships, except for air Jupiter. It must also be said that Jupiter, which is related to the 7th house, especially if it is afflicted, increases the number of marriages. That is, this is an additional indication of polygamy or numerous love affairs, and it is possible that not only before marriage. The defeat of Jupiter makes a person take everything good in a relationship for granted for his destiny and generally tempts to expect too much from others. Such a person is unlikely to carefully and wisely choose a marriage partner, showing excessive optimism and gullibility. Such naivety is dangerous, as it can be used by people who create deceptively false, Jovian impressions of themselves. Swindlers, deceivers. In the modern world, the defeat of Jupiter in the 7th house generally describes our partner as boastful and extravagant, who promises more than he can actually give. In this situation, a very important motive for a relationship is the ability to be proud of your partner. Saturn in the 7th house is a difficult position. Often with this position, partners have a big age difference, which is especially evident in female charts. Early marriage in this position is usually difficult and leads to a reassessment of values around 28 to 30 years. With additional factors, this age can be the date of the crisis for the first marriage. This position of Saturn itself is more favorable for late marriage. The reason here is also that a person with Saturn in the 7th house in any serious relationship faces obstacles and misunderstandings. Lack of life experience exacerbates this state of affairs. The reverse side of this situation, in relations with the opposite sex, a person is very careful since he experiences all love disappointments very cautiously, very seriously, and remembers the insults inflicted for a long time. As a result, he may have deliberately pessimistic views on marriage and relationships. The position of Saturn in the 7th house significantly reduces the number of serious relationships. And with additional factors, it can serve as an indication of celibacy or late marriage, built not so much on love as on reliability and responsibility. In this sense, Saturn is opposite to Jupiter. If Saturn is not bad in sign and is not affected, then the partner can be a conservative, responsible, little emotional person. In a female chart, such a good Saturn may indicate marriage to an elderly, wealthy, or influential man, but the romantic side of the relationship will not worry him much. The married life of such a person is very stable, since marriage is not entered into impulsively and thoughtlessly, especially when Saturn is in the earth element. An afflicted Saturn will create an emotionally cool, aloof relationship. Marriage will lead to sad and perhaps even tragic consequences. In particular, with a serious defeat, even the loss of a partner is possible. It happens that a partner over time can become more and more indifferent, tough, despotic, and he will behave like this for our own good. It is believed that in marriage there is always an element of disappointment in a partner or in the relationship itself. Lunar Nodes in the 7th house. This position always increases the importance of the theme of relationships, no matter which of the nodes is in the 7th house. The lunar node in the 7th house emphasizes the guidance given by the planets in this house and its ruler. The north node increases and consolidates all positive tendencies. Its character is close to Jupiter. In turn, the south lunar node reinforces negative trends since it is close in influence to Saturn, slowing down the processes of the 7th house, narrowing the space of choice and limiting freedom of action. With any node in the 7th house, there are practically no random people in our lives, and relationships can be called karmic. If the node is not aspected, it inclines to a certain role in partnership and relationship, but does not impose this role rigidly. In this case, the node axis can be interpreted as one of the minor, in terms of importance, elements of the map. But the picture completely changes when there is a lunar node in the 7th house, in conjunction with a planet or under aspect. In this case, it is the planet that symbolizes the events, pleasant or not, through which you will have to go. Ketu in the 7th house is a classic indication that although a person is very focused on relationships, they are important to him. First of all, he needs to develop autonomy and leadership qualities. Marriage and stable relationships should not be his meaning of life. They will come by themselves as he develops as a person. Usually, such a situation suggests that it will be difficult to change something in the partnership. If there are negative indications in the 7th house in conjunction with the planet, Then relationships will be attracted in which a person will repay karmic debts. Losses and disappointments are possible, and in some cases a persistent absence of a serious relationship, if the chart contains indications of celibacy. If, with this position of the South Node, the information on the 7th house is positive due to other significators, then we can expect that marriage will come to life by itself. It will simply appear as an opportunity that will be difficult to refuse. Rahu in the 7th house usually gives a different picture. Such a person is born with the experience of developed personal independence. He is faced with the task of learning to interact with others, and opportunities to do so will be attracted almost all the time. This is an immediate karmic assignment, to marry or get married. The theme of marriage will appear in a person's life repeatedly. Retrograde planets in the 7th house. A retrograde planet speaks of the likelihood of insincere, dishonest relationships with the people it describes. For example, Jupiter retrograde may not keep promises and agreements. It's kind of like signing a contract but not fulfilling its terms. A retrograde planet in the house of marriage in most cases indicates an unstable relationship, as it means a person who changes his mind or changes himself significantly in the process of developing relationships. But the retro planets in the house of marriage speak of the unreliability of our partners. Whatever the marriage is on the account of the 2nd or 3rd, but the very time of marriage is analyzed according to the 7th house. That is, even if this is the 2nd marriage when he look at the 7th house, but here's how it will be about, this will tell another house. Unfortunately, there is no consensus on which houses are responsible for the 2nd and subsequent marriage. Someone thinks that the 2nd marriage is the 8th house from the 7th, that is the 2nd house. This is logical as the 8th house from the 7th indicates the duration of the marriage. Accordingly, the 3rd marriage is the 9th house and the 9th house. In the same way, the subsequent marriage is calculated from the fall of the Lagna. But there is another way. From the 7th house, we count how many houses to its ruler, and from him, we count as many houses as there were before him. This house will show what the 2nd marriage will be like. For example, the ruler of the 7th house is Mars. Mars is in the 11th house from the 7th house to the 11th, 5 houses. Further from the 11th house, we count 5 houses. We get the 3rd house. It turns out that this house will tell about the 2nd marriage. The 3rd marriage is counted according to the same scheme, only from the house on which the 2nd marriage fell. The same technique is used for falling Lagna.